welcome to the third session of this day. I'm really looking forward to Cass because you're going to talk about something that is often a forgotten aspect, right, of this, that AI companions don't exist in a void. It's the societal trigger. So without further ado, go ahead, and I'm looking forward to what you're going to tell us.
Okay, well, thank you. First of all, I will begin with, I am not an AI expert, and the reason I want to posit that right at the outset is because I see something called epistemic trespassing in the space of anything to do with technology at the moment, but also where we sit right now in the zeitgeist is knowledge is changing, and it's changing about what we do know and what we don't know about human beings, what we understand about the process of growing up and development, and more about really what Tara and Jennifer were discussing. Now, what I first suggested when we started talking was that I wanted to talk about societal factors. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the societal factors that are inherent, which absolutely match the attachment. But what I wanted to really bring in was something called the Bio-Psychosocial model. And when we think about AI chatbots, the way that we make our alliances, I want to bring in a little bit of therapeutic and psychological theory. So I'm a props person in my office when I'm working with clients. So what I thought I'd do is very quickly talk about the biopsychosocial, the neurological model. So what has already been mentioned is something called attachment. And what I wanted to really start with is what happens the moment we come out of the womb. Now, this is a bit of a cheat because it's taken from my TEDx talk. So I'm really going to talk about what happens with babies in the first couple of years, as Jennifer discussed. So we have this moment where we sit with our parent, our caregiver, and the baby looks at the mum and the mum looks at the baby in this instance. And what happens is there's what we call a contingent moment. The baby sees me and the baby sees me seeing the baby. And in that moment, there is an unconscious drive that really sets the tone for how I know I am important, how I know I am seen, how I know I am understood, and how I know I am safe. Now, what has been happening for 25 years, as long as the internet has existed, but certainly since maybe 2007, since these portable devices, post PDAs and Blackberries, is there's been a lot of conversations that are taking place that are really interfering with this biopsychosocial model. And what happens to babies who are not seen, who are not soothed, who are not safe, who are not secure? Well, they have innate needs, and those innate needs drive them to want to be in contact. And that's a term from transactional analysis, where we talk about in transactional analysis how I know that I am felt by another person, how I am feeling felt by that person. What that then does is it drives our daily social conversations into what is human and what is not human, what is real and what is not real, what is real connection and empathy and what is not. And in doing that, we have a way of perceiving the world. And for children, as both Jennifer and Tara have discussed, they are seeking, they are longing. These are words that really came up in those two conversations. They're looking for somebody to meet those needs. And in doing so, we can often find ourselves seeking by a visual process, or we try to make contact with people and we have conversations and we see things in our imagination. Now, to give you a very quick example of what imagination in a child looks like, I'm going to show you a couple of slides. So let me just do the good old share. And I've only got 3 slides for you. As you can see, you are probably looking at these images and perceiving faces. Your imagination tells you that these items are anthropomorphized. They are smiling back at you. They look excited. They look shocked. Whatever emotions you want to uh, apply to these images is something that children do in and every day as they are tootling about the world. But the other part that children have done and that children have been exposed to, and this is really where I get to the crux of kind of the biopsychosocial model, is children have been using technology and interacting with technology in a way that mirrors what chatbots are doing at the moment. Now, many of you will recognize Woody in the middle, and of course, you could pull his cord and he would talk to you. He would emulate a pseudo relationship. I did notice actually in one of the conversations earlier, somebody did mention Furby, and I thought absolutely brilliant because I've got a picture of a Furby, and of course, Tamagotchis and Nintendogs, and all of the technological items that we've been using. And chatbots are not new. A long time ago, I worked with an organization that created Oyoti, which was a bot which talked to children. And it did it from a perspective of trying to keep them safe online in terms of being their buddy, so to speak. So when we think about where children are and what chatbots offer them, we have those pseudo relationships, something that's often called a parasocial relationship in psychology terminology. But also, what we use, particularly as children, is something called imagination. And imagination comes from the early parts of our development, who we play with, and what happens. And like I said, I would give you a little example of how that works with young children. So even with an item that isn't technological, a baby or a toddler or a young child might be talking to their teddy bear. And what they do is they imagine what that baby says back to them, what that teddy bear says back to them. And they line their teddy bears up, and they might play school or they might play parents. And what we do as a society is we reinforce these kind of behaviors. We help children understand empathy, something called theory of mind. And where we are right now is at this really big juxtaposition. And I absolutely adored what Tara was saying in terms of ethics, because this is really where I come from, working with children, is we have to take the ethics and we have to think about what is really occurring on these devices. And what is happening is there are social norms, if you like, of these bots have moved into society in the same way that social media did. We didn't ask for some of them to be developed. We didn't approve some of them being developed. They have, if you like, in air quotes, just arrived. And children are and have been using them for some time. And I have examples that I talk about in some of my writing, and certainly within the books that I've written, of children talking to the AI apps for a number of reasons. One is often because I'm working with children who do not have those early needs met. Sometimes it's because in a social situation, they may have a learning disability, they may have a social communication disability. And what that means is they will use technology in a way to help them understand the world in which they live. And some of those examples have included a young child who told me that he had a bit of a temperature. So he reached out to his AI bot and to Alexa and asked a question about what he should do to make sure he didn't have the day off school the following day. So he used one of these chatbots as a way to look after his health. There are other children I have worked with who have used these chatbots for guidance around sexual relationships, for sexual health advice. They have used these bots in order to help them understand concepts that they're learning about in school. Sometimes they use them to understand the law of, and that's LORE, not the law, the criminal law or anything. So it helps them understand the law around particular computer games that they play, or environments in which they are hearing language from their peers. And these factors about children living in a real world, which I call corporeal, and being able to reach out and use imagination, pseudo-based parasocial relationships, as they're called, and the way in which these technologies tap into that attachment process. And so what we really have at the moment is a biological model of children needing something that can't always be provided. And that might be because parents are busy at work. Parents have brought in types of care that include childminders or nurseries or before and after school clubs because the cost of living is so much. We have issues around parents not being able to communicate with their child because maybe they don't have those abilities to do that. We have teachers and environments in education settings where children are learning information and maybe they want to go and understand and comprehend that on another level. And so they're using these platforms and these services and these bots to try and enhance their life. And something that Tara was saying, and it wasn't part of my thinking before I was going to do this talk in terms of what I really thought about, but there are these processes later on as children develop about what do we do when it comes to trauma. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because Tara talked about grief bots. What I work with as a clinician is trauma, and trauma goes in two ways. There is the element of revisiting the trauma and having those conversations for which children will declare and disclose and converse with these bots. And then there is the post-traumatic growth where they can utilize these spaces to enable them to do that. Because, as Tara pointed out, there are not enough therapists in the world and there's not enough money for children to be able to pay for their own therapy. And by default, children do not go to therapy by themselves. They are taken. And I use that term because children don't come to my practice by Googling me and then coming down to my practice and asking if I can see them. It is often done by the parental process or loco parentis, and I am asked to work with a child, but it's always the adult who asks me to do that. So by default, children do not come to therapy. And my thinking as Tara was talking was, where are we going to go if we have a societal model if children are now able to seek a proxy therapeutic alliance or a pseudo therapeutic alliance, and it can meet some of those needs that they may be missing in their physical corporeal life? So that's really a question that kind of cropped up from Tara and came out. However, I'm going to go back to what I was thinking about before we started this conversation and for the societal process. We, or should I say the children are being led forward by what I'm calling the Pied Piper. The Pied Piper is capturing children during their developmental phases. And those developmental phases are predictable. And yet we are now in a world where we don't know what we don't know because, as Tara pointed out, the services are being used, the services have been developed, We do not have the ethical or data protection and frameworks around how we allow children to go on these devices, and also how we can protect in those spaces. So what I wanted to do was take a pause and breathe, because what we often do, and this was my my process around this epistemic thinking earlier, is we get ourselves into a flux. We get ourselves into a space where we can only see risks or we can only see benefits, and sitting with the complexity of what is occurring on a social level, what is occurring on a biological level, what's occurring on a psychological level, what's occurring on a cultural level, what's occurring on a global connective level. And I am thinking that there are so many different layers to where we stand right now, that societal factors are, there will always be profit over principle businesses. There will always be businesses that create services that are ethical and in the best interests of children, but are then misused. And because we don't know what we don't know, and we don't have enough robust research at this point in time, I think there is panic, a global panic at the moment, and we are taking a precautionary approach. And with children, that is probably the best approach to take. But also, how would it be for children if we prevented the use of some of these platforms and it turned out at a later date that there were some of those benefits that Tara talked about, in terms of being able to have a connection with a parent? And I'm thinking here about the kinds of parents that I work with who are possibly heading into palliative care, could be in a separated family, could be in a blended family, that the complexities of the social structures have not been taken into account when these bots have been rolled out, so to speak. And what we've got at the moment is the technological, and we're missing the human in terms of what we need to understand about the human process, our global meaning making crisis that's occurring at the moment, our inability to trust or be trusted, our process between people, whether empathy is there or not, and the rising numbers of people who are being diagnosed or seeking diagnoses around non or clinical diagnostic issues such as ADHD or autism, which provides us with another lens of research. It provides us with another avenue to go down in terms of what about people who have those difficulties that could be relying on these services to help them develop skills in which they wouldn't be able to develop them in other situations. And of course, how do we see ourselves globally, whether we are individualistic cultures, whether we are collectivistic cultures, and how does that play out in terms of the kinds of technology that we're designing? And if I just go back to, I'm well aware that people have been naming particular sources and particular platforms, but if I think about the proposition that came out not so long ago from Meta, that these bots are going to be designed to reduce the level of loneliness, what is it that we actually mean by loneliness, and how do we measure that? Because that's the bit that I'm not seeing in terms of the research. And what is it that we're aiming to achieve when we say that we have a loneliness epidemic and the provision of these bots? Because what is it that we could do societally by meeting those needs in the real world? What is it we need to do? So I'm thinking here, this is the human intervention. This is the human part of how we live alongside technology. What is it we need to do? How do we educate parents to be parents in a world of technology? How do we educate and support them in the process of helping create a number of contingent moments that provide attachment for children, that helps them feel seen, soothed, safe, secure, as Dan Siegel calls the 4 S's. And what would that actually result in terms of the amount of use of these types of bots? Now, all of those issues in terms of what we do as a society, how we work together, is really complicated by the fact that at this point in time, we do not have a global process for technology. We do not have a global set of guidelines. We do not have a global or coherent, connected conversation going on. We've actually got siloed spaces, which are called countries. We've got siloed services, siloed ways of doing this. And for me, there's something about how do we create the humanistic, collective conversation around how we think about technology going forward. And those societal facts, or factors, should I say, those societal factors are, from what I can see, completely missing from this approach. We're taking quite an individualistic approach to types of services, organizations that will want to monitor them, and we are not doing what I think is required when it comes to working in this space, which happens actually in my profession quite a lot. We have to have multidisciplinary meetings in order to support the child. And I'm not seeing that replicated in this space around societal issues, which we are the society, we are the human beings that are creating this technology, that are creating the new ways of knowing, the new knowledge, the way in which we learn, the way in which we communicate. And there are going to be biopsychosocial impacts and trade-offs from this missing element if we do not come together as human beings. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I can see a few chat things. Okay, Stu, is there anything, Angelina, that you wanted to ask in terms of where we're at? We are separated. Can I hear you? You're on mute.
Ah, okay, today's my technology day.
Technology guru. We're doing a good event.
No, I mean, wow, there's so much to take in, but that's a really good point about the societal separation. I'd seen the problem, but I hadn't seen it that way. I mean, do you see any even quick fixes to help make it better?
Okay. I am quite controversial. I'm going to say something now. If we put our egos down and we put children and families and human beings in the center, and we approach this from a humanistic perspective, we all see each other as equal, we're all together on this, then we might stand a chance. Unfortunately, I see competition. Now, the part about human beings that's so wonderful is we work better collaboratively than we do in competition. And yet, what I perceive from this kind of meta perspective, standing back, obviously not the company, meta perspective, is that as a global community, there is too much competition about who needs to come up with the rules, who can have the best set of standards, who might have the best set of laws. And what I see is we're not working together as a team. We're working like cells in a petri dish that are fighting for survival rather than working together like you would see in an ant colony, for example. And I've just decided that humans are ants there, haven't I?
Or lemmings, that's another thing. No, and what about kids and anyone who has a question, please feel free to write it in the chat. What about, I mean, you said the kids and therapists, they're turning to therapists, and that was such a good point because they don't seek out therapists by themselves, right? I mean, what about this? I mean, how can we help with that? I mean, because is there any
So the AI chatbots are not the first piece of technology to even be in the therapeutic space. Okay. I gave a talk to some psychotherapists not so long ago, and I talked because I was doing the talking. I talked about ELIZA. I've talked about the way we anthropomorphize issues like the Turk. This is going back hundreds of years. So there is something about well, it's introject, but we also project. We project what we want to hear and see onto an other. And this is what happens with a lot of these chatbots is a child sees and hears text that is what they are looking for. It's a little bit like an echo chamber, but it's a personal therapeutic echo chamber. And a good therapist notices what's going on in terms of the therapeutic alliance. And AI cannot match that. And I'm going to do comma yet, because AI is based on therapists and conversations and 25 years of information uploaded to the internet that it is learning from, and theoretical perspectives, and lots of books, which have included mine that have been stolen, but that's just a copyright thing that I'll throw to one side. That these AI bots and systems are learning from us. So, of course, they're going to emulate us. And when it comes to the research around therapy and its impact, what matters, and it doesn't matter the modality, is the relationship between the client and the therapist. And some of that can be matched and mirrored by some of these devices, which is both horrifying and quite reassuring, I guess, because if a child who is in complete distress and is suicidal reaches out to a bot and says, I feel X, and let's take the bot has been adequately trained and can pick up on this and does not advise that the child ends their life. But if a bot says, yeah, I hear today's been really bad, isn't that a moment where a child can go, I can take that, I can feel that I'm feeling felt, as I discussed earlier. That is often the connection that prevents a child from ending their life. That is the connection that we are looking at in all of the suicide research and suicide ideation. That is what we are seeking. And if that can be met by something, and I've always said this, right? Children talk to teddy bears. If a teddy bear or a pet dog or a pet cat can meet a child's need for connection, then in between the sessions where they're seeing me, they are getting some of what they need. And sometimes that is the just enough connection that a child needs in order not to end their life. Unfortunately, the technology is not trained in safeguarding. It is not trained in picking up on suicide ideation versus suicide intent. It's unfortunately, as we've talked about, and this is where we got into a conversation, Angeline, this is what happened with the young man who was pushed towards ending his own life by the character AI bot. We need ethics, we need sensible safeguarding, and we need to have those discussions, and we need people to put in that information into the systems, and that requires a human conversation. Technology cannot fix a human problem. It can assist, but it cannot fix it.
Wow, thank you. We're almost out of time. I just wanted to ask Almira's question. Thank you for this. Like, I'm a parent too. Do we fail as parents if our kids ask AI for consult or advice instead of asking us?
No, children have always done that. Children have always asked other people. It's one of the things, which is why we need trustworthy systems, because children have always asked peers, teachers, uncles, friends, grandparents, and what we actually need is helping children assimilate and understand critical thinking. But that's like a separate talk to what we're doing here. And what we're doing at the moment is we're allowing them to go and talk to, in air quotes, a stranger on the street.
Thank you. That was an amazing talk, Catherine. Really, Kath. Yeah, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we'll have a recording or share it with your friends. So, and
thank you.
looking forward to your book at the end of July, right?
Yes, swiftly moving on.
Picture book. Thank you.